Where would this podcast be if we weren't starting a couple minutes late? Um, what can I tell you? Old habits die young, I suppose. Um, anyways, we're here. It's a Tuesday night. It's another Tuesday night show of the Rain Race podcast after we were so convinced that we had a roll of shows going on Thursday here. Get a little used to it, I'll say, because we're going to be switching up the script here quite a bit over the next few weeks, getting these shows in when possible. I'll let you know those times at the end of the episode. But here we are. I am still here at home for about the next 24 hours. And I'll tell you what, Stu, I've been running around like a bat out of hell trying to get everything all squared away. I'm leaving tomorrow night, if you're not aware, for the 24 hours of Le Mans and then the 24 hours of Nürburgring after that. And if you know me, you know I haven't started packing yet. So we got my own 24-hour race coming up here in about an hour or so. But before that, who would I be if I did not sit down here and have a nice chat about one of the most prestigious endurance races, not endurance race in the world, the IMSA. What was the official name for this one?
Oh boy, it was the Chevrolet Detroit Sports Car Classic, which honestly, I mean, I didn't even really know that that's what the official name was, because on everything it just has the Detroit Grand Prix logo. They just piggyback off the IndyCar one. So I don't know if many people knew that it was the Chevrolet Detroit Sports Car Classic, but here we are.
And there you were at the race, actually, in person. Bit of a surprise for me on that one. I didn't think you'd be making the trek out there, but I guess it is one of the closer IMSA races for you now. I guess apart from, of course, CTMP and then Watkins Glen, I suppose would be closer, maybe?
Yep. Yeah, Watkins Glen would be marginally closer. Got up at like 4:45 a.m. on Saturday morning. Exactly what I want to be doing on my Saturday morning. And made the trek to Detroit. So I'm glad that I was able to make it out there. It's have you ever been to a street track yourself?
Does Le Mans count?
No.
Okay. Well,
in an urban setting.
No, actually, I haven't.
It's so I came into this with a little bit of experience at the Toronto IndyCar weekend.
Oh, no. We lost him. It's the first time.
Down. No, are we here?
We're here now. I don't know what that was about.
The software is just messing up. That's cool.
They don't want to hear about Toronto.
No, they don't. They want to hear about Detroit. So Detroit was very interesting. A ton of parking garages, like, littered around the circuit. Very, very difficult to get around. Like, very difficult. It was not clearly marked where to go. You definitely needed to get there early and spend a decent amount of time getting a lay of the land. Because you're probably going to make wrong turns and find yourself in areas that you that wasn't great for watching or experiencing the racing. But at the end of the day, a very interesting circuit for sure. Some really cool vantage points that you're not going to get at any other track, like being up on top of a parking garage that looks like right down onto the track is really cool. Overall, interesting track. Not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but if you have if you're in the Detroit area next year, then it's kind of a cool little circuit. But be prepared to have difficulties getting around and be checked at security like every it seemed like so.
So what's the deal with that? Because it's a 100-minute race. You don't have a lot of time to get around as is. And then you add on top of that, you said it's difficult to get around. So is that sort of just to find your spot, stake it out, and spend the 100 minutes there, or were you moving around a bit?
I went into the weekend like trying to plan things out in my mind, and I thought, okay, I want to try and I want to do the grid walk. I always like to do the grid walk really I think you get a really good feel for what the fans are like for that event on the grid walk. And especially at a street circuit like this, I thought it was going to be cool to do that. So I want to do the grid walk, and then ideally I was going to try and go down to turn 3, which is the hairpin at the end of the long straightaway.
Yeah.
But I quickly learned when I walked in that morning that it was not going to be super easy to go straight from the grid walk. It's a pretty small circuit, right? It's 1.6 miles.
Yeah.
So I thought that would be a reasonable expectation. Like I could go from one track to the other and it would be pretty quick, but it didn't really turn out to be the case. It was it was a pretty small path to go from one end to the other. I knew there was going to be a lot of people as well. So I kind of bailed on that, and I kind of hung out the entire race in the immediate vicinity around the pit lane, try and check out what pit stops. I knew that there was going to be a lot of action in the pits during the race. But one of the other things that I was really surprised about is right on the start finish straight. One of the parking garages there was almost exclusively like tailgating. The parking spaces that they had up against the track on the start finish straight were almost exclusively reserved for tailgating. So I thought that was really interesting, kind of a unique aspect to a street race like this. But yeah, overall, like I said, difficult to get around. It definitely affected what I was planning to do during the race. It kind of threw all that out the window. But I got to experience a lot of the track during the morning warm up and during some of the Indy Next qualifying and things like that. So yeah, Detroit overall, like I said, I'm glad that I went and I got to experience it. And definitely a unique track, but yeah, not my favorite.
What can you say? From a track standpoint, good report there on what the ins and outs were for the circuit itself. I'll move things on to the actual race here, because I think one of the things people have been talking about is this was a surprisingly good race, right? I mean, let's put it this way, okay? There is an expression that I like to quote quite a bit, and it's, expectation is the thief of all joy. Okay. Meaning, if you have a race, like let's use Le Mans coming up next for me. Okay. Expectation is way up here.
Yeah. Okay? Through the roof.
Massive hypercar grid, equally strong GT or LMGT3 grid. We have the LMP2s there as well. It is perhaps the greatest endurance race of the season. What that means is that if you get a race like last year, where by all means still a very exciting finish, we had 7 cars finish on the lead lap in the hypercar class, which is absolute record by far. But we did have that very, very long safety car period in the middle of the race. Now you can argue, was that necessary to have it out for that long or not? That's an argument for another day, and I'm not making that now. But what that means is that it really brought the race down a few points. Okay, expectations way up here. End race, the end result gets dropped a little bit because of how excited we were going in. I think Detroit, if we can be brutally honest here, after what we saw last year, after what we've seen some of the IndyCar races at this track look like, for me, I got to be honest with you, expectations were kind of like down here. Okay, let's just keep the race clean. Who knows what the passing is going to look like? I mean, it hasn't been a barn burner race. I was going to say in the past 2 years, really, IMSA, the WeatherTech Championship, has only been there starting last year. Mm-hmm. The race that we got, number one, was very clean. Well, for Detroit standards, far better than last year. I think to me, that's the main standout is this race. While yes, there definitely was some contact, quite a bit of contact going on in both classes. Let's not be afraid to call it out. It wasn't a mess. And you can't say the same thing about some of the IndyCar races that have been here. You can't say the same thing about the WeatherTech race that was here last year. So for me,
the Challenge race the year before that.
Oh yeah. Or if you want to go back even further, there you go. To me, that was the main takeaway here is I think for how sort of realistic the expectations were going in, the race really put on a great show. We had minimal yellows, 2 debris cautions throughout the race. But apart from that, really not much interruption. That was my main takeaway. We're going to go into that a little bit more. I want to get some of your thoughts off of that first before I go further.
No, I agree. I agree with that. You know, you make a good point that like expectations were, I feel like rock bottom for this race.
Sorry,
you know,
IMSA.
like, yes, I mean, I was talking to people before the race and it's like, you know, what are we expecting? Like we're expecting basically what it was last year. Lots of interruptions, lots of full course yellows. You know, it's going to be a difficult race to stay like engaged with really when that's happening, when there's so many frequent interruptions. And you know what, for to the benefit for probably, you know, biggest shout out to like the drivers in all of this is that didn't end up happening. It didn't end up being a full course yellow, you know, fest. We had every car but one that technically finished this race. And you know, realistically, everybody completed most of the laps. So like there weren't, it wasn't just a mess like it was last year, which was good. But in my opinion, if you had asked me after the hour and 10 or hour and 15-minute mark, or just before that full course yellow came out, if you had asked me if it was a good race, I would have just told you no, that it was not a good race up until that point. We saw very minimal passing, which we expected at this track. We didn't expect passing was going to come easily, and it didn't. You know, we did still see some messy, some sloppy driving, I guess you could say that. We did see dives up the inside. You know, you saw Vassar Sullivan, you know, kind of stuff Rexy into the tires, and you know, it was a low speed. It's a 90-degree corner, so you're not going that fast. Thankfully, Roxy was able to drive away from that, and you know, kind of return the favor a little bit later on. But you know, we saw lots of aggressive sends because passing was so difficult. So there was a lot of rubbing and a lot of contact. Not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think there was really a moment, maybe with there was maybe a couple of moments where it crossed the line. But it was definitely far better than it was last year. It's just, I want a track to actually be able to produce overtaking opportunities, and this track didn't really do that. I know we saw some great action at the end of it, but that's why I wouldn't have said that it was a great race after the hour and 10-minute mark. After the last half hour, after that last full course yellow, I think we saw some great racing. We saw some, especially in GTP, we saw cars making, you know, some elbows out passes, in some instances, some really clean passes in other instances. So it was, overall, at the end of the day, I was impressed with what we saw especially in the last half hour. And I guess the cleanliness of the race overall, but definitely a race of sort of two parts for me that produced some good racing, but also some, you know, not super exciting, fun racing to watch.
Yeah, I guess in some ways you could say it was a bit of a perfect storm, right? With how the yellows fell and who was in what position when the yellows fell. You know, you could definitely make that argument. I want to go back to what you're talking about, which was really the racecraft here. You know, I said it was a clean race earlier. I sort of caught myself very early when I said that, because by no means was this a
by a street race standards, pretty clean.
Well, and that's what I want to get into here is, you know, there were a lot of teams, especially in the GTD Pro class.
You're not in Mama yet.
We're not yet. In the GTD Pro class especially, there was a lot of getting elbows out. And I would say some of it went over the line, okay? Like Paul Miller Racing, I forget which car it was. Was it the one car?
I think it was the 48 that went into the Mustang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking here about... and did they get penalized for that?
They did.
Yeah. Okay, so that one did get penalized. There were other incidents, though. of similar nature in the GTP class as well. When we saw the number 7 Porsche leading on the end of that final restart, it was, obviously them versus the 93 Acura,
Yep.
and then the 10 Cadillac as well. They got sort of tossed around a little bit there by the 93 car. 93, of course, didn't end up getting penalized for it. But really what I sort of want to tread a fine line here between, okay, this is a street circuit. Drivers are going to have to get their elbows out. They're going to have to push each other around a little bit because otherwise you're just not going to pass. I don't think, maybe with the exception of a dive up into the hairpin where the other guy just gives you the room, I don't really think you're going to see many passing opportunities here. I mean, I guess with the 93 pulled in turn 1 was a big exception, but I really don't think you're seeing moves into turn 1 happen every single lap.
No.
So,
No.
if I'm IMSA, what I would do is look at that race and say, okay, it wasn't a perfectly clean race by any standards. We did let some things slide, but I do, as a fan, think that this race should be a bit of an exception for that. I don't really want that to become the standard, for the drivers moving forward at other races where they are granted more space.
I agree. I think you make a really good point there. Is just, for the governing body to recognize the difference between a race like Detroit, where it is so difficult to pass, and you're going to, see moves in order to create passes. There's going to have to be moves that may not be conventional at other circuits and may operate a little bit more in the gray area of what's allowed versus what's not allowed. Overall, at the end of the day, I think they did a good job of policing that in this race. I thought the drivers, generally speaking, didn't cross the line. There were a couple instances of it, sure. But generally speaking, especially compared to last year, this was a much cleaner race than we saw. So that was certainly good to see. It surprised me. I'm sure it surprised a lot of other people that were, whether you're watching at home, whether you're at the track. I think everybody was a little bit surprised for how few full course yellows we ended up seeing in that race.
Yeah. Let's talk about something else here. GTP class. This was, of course, the first race this season that was not won by either of the Porsche Penske 963s. How many races in this year are we? This was the fifth race of the season.
Yep.
So
past the halfway mark for GTPs.
Yeah, didn't make it quite as far as the streak that Wayne Taylor had from 2017. I believe they hit 5.
They did hit 5, yeah.
But let's talk about number one, sort of how that came about. They didn't have the ultimate pace this weekend. I'd say they were probably. It's very difficult to say.
It
because
is.
On qualifying pace, 1 lap pace, they were behind Acura and BMW. And then were they behind Cadillac as well?
Nope.
I can't remember.
No, they qualified 5th and 6th.
Okay. So let's just say 3rd fastest on 1 lap pace then. But they did. I think this got lost in the end results with the 93 winning, sort of taking the headline away. But Porsche did the thing again.
Yes,
like
they did.
When we had
Absolutely.
that green flag pit stop cycle, they did the thing from Long Beach all over again. And dare I
don't
say,
know how they did it either. Like, I do not know how they pulled it off.
Let me tell you, when I saw them staying out and I saw that they had clear track position, they weren't getting caught up in GT traffic at the time, I knew that was going to happen. You just have a feeling in the back of your head that, okay, they've done this before. They've executed this same strategy at Long Beach, and it worked out for them there. There's no reason it's not going to pay off for them here either.
But the 93 also came out into some clear air. Because I remember that being mentioned on the broadcast that, why is the 93 coming in? It seems kind of early. Why are they coming in? And it's, because they're getting some clean air. So maybe it's just indicative of the pace that Porsche had when they had clean air and they were able to just go. But it was impressive.
I did look at the lap times when when the sevens stayed out and they were out in front, because I sort of knew that they were going to be cooking something with that.
Yeah.
And they were setting laps that were faster than the 93. Of course, 93, you have a fresh driver in the car.
Yeah,
Randy Van
that's true.
Zynder hopped in the car. Might take a few laps to get up to speed. No tire changes going on here,
Yeah.
right?
Nope.
So
I don't
so
believe so.
you're not warming up tires. That's not really a concern. I think one of the things that got brought up on the broadcast was that the 963 has this like insane ability to warm up its tires faster than seemingly other cars in the class.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect that to be the difference here because they weren't changing tires at the stop. So
Yep.
I don't really know what it is either, but I can't say I was surprised when they came out in front. And it wasn't like they were extremely close either. I mean, they had a few second buffer back to second after they came out of the pit. So I think if we didn't have that second yellow for debris, to be honest with you, I think that was the sevens race to lose.
Oh, that's a good argument to have. I don't know what the gap was, but that's the word I was looking for. What the gap was at the time of that, but
Well, I can tell you one thing, and that's that the 93 and particularly the 10 were much quicker after that final restart than they were
yes,
between the pit stop and then that yellow coming out. Like the difference between them and the 7 Porsche and that end stint of the race there after the final yellow was pretty significant.
absolutely.
And of course, they kind of swallowed up the 7 car there. You know, they both made a move at the same time on the car after the 93 pushed them wide in the hairpin. So I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. I'm going to leave it at that. But this was another race that Porsche definitely was in a position to. You could argue whether or not they would win, I suppose, but I think that they were in a favored position at that point had that yellow not come out.
So I'll say this as well, and maybe this is honestly a bit more of a shout out to IMSA. With they made a lot of BOP changes going into this race, and there was a lot of fans are always going to have takes on BOP changes. But looking at the B pillar report, which shows the 50% fastest lap, or the fastest 50% of a driver's laps in their car, removing essentially like outliers and things like that. And you look at the GTP class, and Nick Tandy was the quickest on average lap pace in the 7 at a 107.3. But you go down to Tom Blomqvist in the 60, who is a 107.8. And that's like 2/3 of the drivers in the class were on average within, that half second or less of each other. A lot of, there's going to be traffic that's taken into account with a lot of things here. But I think really the top 4 manufacturers, Cadillac, BMW, Acura, and Porsche, especially BMW, Acura, and Porsche, in my opinion, showed really good, really consistent pace throughout this race. And I think it looked like, from where I was, that the Acura and the Cadillac were just better as that stint went on and the tires wore down some more. I don't know, maybe they're trying to conserve tires more through the first part of that race, or as I realized at the track, the latter part of that race, this was like a 3:00 start. So we ended it was getting closer to 5, but the sun had moved significantly over the course of that time. And there's lots of tall buildings. There's lots of parking garages that are right around the track. The track was virtually, it seemed like from where I was, mostly covered in shade. Almost, a good chunk of it was covered in shade. And I wondered if that may have influenced, the handling of these cars. Well, certainly it would have to some extent. But if that was a big influence on the closing minutes of this race, when we really saw Acura come alive and take the lead from Cadillac, and then prior to that, Cadillac coming alive and taking the lead from Porsche. So there were some changes for sure going on throughout that race. Maybe the tires wearing, maybe a bit of track temp changes, but it was a good finish. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. And of course, like I said, it was 93 Acura picking up a win, and really their first, I'd say, really strong performance in Sebring this year, where they finished third. Of the rest, maybe you can look at that 93 team and say they're the best of the rest this year. I didn't look at the championship standings, so I don't know if they're actually third in points right now or not.
The 24 is still ahead of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at least in terms of I would say they're pretty close to BMW. Not that it really matters right now. I mean, we're still halfway through the season. There's a lot to change right now, but let's be honest, it still is going to take a minor miracle for anybody to unseat Porsche at this point in the season.
The closest non-Porsche. I mean, let's remember, Porsche still finished third and fourth in this race,
right?
And they still gained points on the cars who are immediately chasing them. The 24, who is like third in points, they still gained points on the 24 in this race. So it's it's almost a 300. It's a just under 300 point gap, which is over a race gap from the first place 7 to the third place number 24, and the number 6 is 70 points back. So it's not like you basically are looking at a race where the 6 and the 7 finish last and second last for anybody to realistically get back up into the championship conversation right now.
Yeah, catch them if you can, I guess.
Exactly.
Now
before sticking with some GTP stuff, there was one of the questions that one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, what did you think of Cadillac in this race? They come out. I know they're leading late in the race. They showed good pace at the end, or the 10 showed good pace at the end. Ultimately, they settle for second, which I think they have to be pleased with, given the manufacturer. Their previous best finish this season was like 5th. So, what did you think of Cadillac this weekend?
Kind of 50-50, no? I mean, you look at the 10 finishing second, I think it's hard to say if they really had the pace to win. I mean, it's so difficult to pass here, even though we did have ultimately a pass for the win. So I think that did play a big factor there, but there was definitely a few laps where it looked like the 10 would have a shot at it. The 40 and the 31, I can't really remember either of them being really in the conversation much at all. Yep. They finished 9th and 10th respectively. So I'm trying to remember if there was anything really significant that happened with them that we just didn't hear about, or I couldn't remember. The 31 finished a lap down. So
yes. Well, the 31 had to make 2 pit stops, because the 31, there was an incident that happened. It was one of the BMWs kind of early on in the race, had to be the opening, like maybe around the 30-minute mark. There was one of the BMWs that went off in I guess it's technically the second to last corner on the track, just before pit entry in the runoff area. And they were kind of just stuck there. Like, we didn't know if they were going to get back going. I think it was the BMW that did this, but I also know that one of the Lexi did this as well. But they came down pit road during this, and there was another GTP that did. It may have been like the 25 BMW that came down at the same time. I think they were anticipating that maybe a full course yellow was going to come out for the car being stuck there. Mm-hmm. And then, you get like 10 or 15 minutes under full course yellow, and they would be able to save the fuel, basically just pass the entire field by virtue of making that early pit stop. But that never worked out for them. The full course yellow didn't come out. So and then the 31, I guess they must have, I don't know. They had to come back down pit road, I believe, at some point. I think I remember seeing the 31 in the pits twice. So that's why they finished so far down. But they also qualified horrendously. Like they qualified 7th, 8th, and 9th. The only cars that they beat, I'm pretty sure, were the 85 and the 23, which the customer Porsche and then the Aston Martin. And then you look at the final finishing results too, and the 40 and the 31 finished behind the Aston Martin, which is not exactly a fantastic look for a car that's now been kicking around for 3 years. My thoughts on Cadillac were I think that they just played the strategy well in this race and got a little bit fortunate that it worked out for them, because they pulled off the biggest overcut of anybody in this race. They stayed out forever, and then they boxed around the hour mark of the race, and then not too long after that, the full course yellow came out. But even still, even before the full course yellow came out, I mean, because they had done the overcut for so long, they found themselves in like second place, I think, just between the two Porsches after the pit stop. So I think the pit strategy is definitely what got them into that position, but I don't think they really had the pace, the second place pace. Although they were really quick at the end. I will absolutely acknowledge that, but definitely a concerning weekend again for Cadillac. I think that, sure, you got that second place finish that looks really good, but you also walk away with a 9th and a 10th, which is, they're heading to Le Mans they're heading to Le Mans now, and they have the rest of the IMSA season ahead of them, and they need to turn it around. They need to build off this, is what they need to do going into the summer, and get that program back to where we all expect it to be.
Well, I think that's what some people are saying is take the second place if you're Wayne Taylor Racing. Yeah, it's disappointing. It's not a win, but you need to build off that. Good hopes for them going into Le Mans, maybe, get that train rolling here, and see what you can do with that momentum. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about them. Disappointing-ish race for them at sort of their home marquee event. But we'll see how strong they come back at Watkins Glen, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. Should we touch on some GTD Pro, or did you have anything else to mention
No,
I'll mention one more thing about GTP, actually. Just, again, another disappointing weekend for BMW in GTD or in GTP. Like they go out and they qualify well. They qualified 3rd and 4th. Sure, they lost that pole streak, but it was going to happen at some point. They still had a good qualifying effort. And then the 25 picked up a penalty on their first pit stop. They had a crew member that went over the wall too soon, which also happened to one of the Vassar Sullivan cars. It might have been the 14.
Yeah, it was the 14.
And I thought that was interesting because you don't really remember those. I don't remember hearing about those penalties too often in previous races. So I don't know if it's just something that the officials were being hyper aware of this weekend, or if just by chance it happened. But yeah, they kind of shot themselves a little bit in the foot there, and then just didn't really have the race pace again. Just kind of disappointing result for them once again, which it's all going to come together for them at some point, right? Or do we think that this is going to be like a situation that we had with the 31 last year, where it just slowly falls apart more and more? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll chalk it up as the same I said for Cadillac. I mean, they've definitely had more pace than the Cadillacs so far this year. As you said, first race here, they didn't qualify on pole. But we're coming up to Watkins Glen. It's a track they've historically been pretty decent at. So maybe that's where they finally get that big break to turn things around.
True. They won this race 2 years ago. So Watkins Glen, not Detroit.
Yeah.
So GTD Pro.
GTD Pro. What can you say? You know, when you're in Detroit, why not just have a battle between Ford and Corvette, huh?
I guess we could call it a battle.
Well, yeah.
I
Who finished
mean,
1-2 at the end of the day?
yeah, I like it was fun to watch them. I was hoping that more of a battle was going to develop at the end of it, but I think Mike Rockin, I think was it on David? I think David Land talked to Mike Rockenfeller after the race,
Yeah.
and I think Rocky said that the Corvette had an an advantage down the straights, or they had an advantage in the straights, and then it was flip flopped. So all that they had to really focus on was the straightaways, or that long straight, and that was about it. So that's kind of what it looked like as well. I will say this. I mean, we saw Ford win this race. We saw Corvette finish second. Then we saw Pfaff finish third. Let's go Pfaff.
Again.
Their first podium of the season. So there's just 2 entries in GTD Pro two full season entries that don't have a podium this year, which is kind of wild.
Pfaff was on the podium at Laguna Seca, weren't they?
Sorry?
Pfaff was on the podium at Laguna Seca?
I don't believe so.
I thought they were third.
Were they? Oh yeah, they were. You're right. So I was completely incorrect on that. Okay, so it's only
second of the year.
It's only the 4 Corvette and the 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus that don't have a podium yet. But I think this is overall a little bit of a disappointing weekend for Corvette. I know that they finished second, but I think the pace that they had shown in practice on Friday, to tell them that they were going to walk away with a second and a 6th place finish, I think would be a little bit disappointing. Not to mention that they lost to Ford. They lost the battle of the Motor City. But yeah, I think that if you would have asked me after Friday, like, Corvette looked like the absolute ones to beat. And then with the way the qualifying kind of played out on Saturday, there was a red flag for the Dragon Speed Ferrari spinning around, and we really only got half of that qualifying session. I think a couple of things go a little bit differently, and we could be talking about, a Corvette 1-2 and kind of a picture perfect weekend for them at their home race. But other than that, GTD Pro I thought was just GTD Pro was a little bit messier for sure than GTP was. We did see some moments, some beating and banging in GTP. We didn't talk about the move that the 10 Cadillac made on the Porsche to take the lead. Don't really think that there is much to talk about with that. I didn't think that it was that crazy. I certainly didn't think it deserved a penalty. At the end of the day, the I think it was the 7, or was it? Yeah, it was the 7. Yeah. Came out ahead, still out of the hairpin corner. It was the next corner that they ended up losing that spot. So, but more beating and banging going on in the GTD Pro class, and it was definitely more elbows out. But it was the final stint of that race was basically just running, nose to tail in a line. There wasn't really an opportunity to make a pass for a position there at the end. So yeah, it was fine. GTD Pro racing, definitely not the best GTD Pro race that we've seen all season.
Yeah. First of all, I lied. It was the 3 Corvette that was third at Laguna Seca. Okay. I thought that it was the 9. I remember it was close between the two of them. That out of the way.
They did it was a solid run still for Pfaff though at Laguna.
Yeah.
So
well, and they're still. My point was going to be, because I thought that was Pfaff's second podium of the year. They're still chasing their first win since that Porsche program a couple of years ago.
Sebring
weren't. Yeah. So, nice to see them sort of on the upward trend right now. I want to talk about a couple of the incidents that we saw in the GTD Pro class. Mainly, let's talk about the
Oh,
Um,
this one.
the incident, huh? The AO
Yeah, the incident.
AO Racing Porsche versus the Ford Corvette, the sort of street takeover, huh? That
Yeah.
they had going on there. The I turn you, you turn me.
It was interesting to see how that played out. Yeah, I didn't really actually. I've only seen the part of it where the Corvette is on the inside, and then Rex or Roxy gets spun, and then Roxy spins the Corvettes. I didn't see what the move looked like prior, like going into the entry of that corner, to really comment on that. But I mean, at the end of the day, both of these cars got drive through penalties. Um, you know, they finished in the same order that they were in when they were entering that corner, with Roxy being ahead and the Corvette behind. So I don't know. I think it just kind of works out. They both got drive through penalties. It hurt them for that little bit of the shenanigans there. They lost the position to Vassar Sullivan, but yeah, I thought it was deserved. I thought it was kind of funny, to be honest, that it was like Roxy just kind of kept that kind of kept the foot in the throttle, and just decided to take the Corvette with them at the end. But I don't know. Did you have any specific thoughts on it?
No, I think it just sort of summed up what was going on in that class a little bit. Where
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
it was
Just
sort of that perfect
shenanigans.
summary. Yeah. I will say another comment though about the Corvette. This was the third time this season, if I'm not mistaken, that we've seen that
Oh,
exact same issue with the rear panel of that car coming loose.
yep,
Of course, this most notably happened back at Daytona with the 4 car when they were battling Paul Miller Racing. It happened at the start of the race this year,
yep.
at Detroit, and I believe it happened one other time this season, but now I
Long
can't
Beach
remember. Okay.
DXDT, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
So sort of similar to what we were saying with the Mustang last year, where we kept having issues with the diffuser of that car in the opening races of the season. They've, of course, this car and the Mustang both debuted at the same time last year, but this seems like a recurring issue with the Corvette this year that I don't remember popping up last year in either this championship or also worldwide as well. Although I guess I can't speak to the worldwide scene quite as far.
it. I was just thinking that last year we were just criticizing the Ford for what was it, the boot lid? Is that what
Yeah.
we had established?
Well, it was that. It was the diffuser as well was loose a couple times, right?
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, they had their problems. They resolved those problems, so now it's kind of on Corvette. It seems like to resolve this rear bumper issue because yeah, you're looking at this not only from the factory team. I mean, in the GTD Pro class, you don't want to be taking ridiculous meatball flags, that you have to come in and fix the rear bumper on this thing just from a little bit of slight contact. Like it's definitely a regular occurrence at this point. So if you're them, you got to figure out what you need to adjust to resolve that and beef it up or make it a little bit more secure, because if you're looking at this from a customer perspective as well, like the Corvette is one of the most expensive GT3 cars. My understanding my understanding of it, at least in the market right now. And if you're paying a hefty price for that car, you do not want to be having silly, these silly flags and being forced to come in to make a pit stop to replace damage that really shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had much else about GTD Pro.
I got one
Like it
more.
was. Yo, you got one more? All right,
I
bring
got
it
one
on.
more. It's about your pick. The
Oh,
14 Lexus, huh?
oh boy.
What a down and up weekend for the 14 Lexus, yeah?
Yeah.
Lap times disallowed in qualifying.
Yep.
So
Yep.
starting off the weekend on the
Because
wrong foot.
they failed tech. Is that what it
Yeah.
was?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
failed tech ground clearance after qualifying.
Of course, yes.
Um, and then in the race, 2 drive-through penalties. One of them was for the crew
The
members over the
Roxy
wall.
incident.
Yeah, and then one of them was for the Roxy incident. Um, but managed to finish. I forget. Oh, see, did I
Fourth.
lose my race results? Yeah, they managed to
fourth.
finish fourth throughout all of that. So that's what I mean. It seemed like the cards were stacked a little bit against them, but with that late race restart, I guess just keeping it on the lead lap, and keeping the car in one piece is maybe even more important than that, because you look behind them and it's the 77 and the 4.
They didn't deserve that fourth place though, because the drive-through penalties kind of handed that to them, and the shenanigans again kind of handed that to them. But yeah.
So just wanted to make a point of that. It's a very surprising rebound with how poorly their race had gone up until that point.
I mean, it is a rebound, but it's kind of like the Cadillac discussion, right? Like they need, I mean, it's not a second place finish like it was for Cadillac, but this is something at least for them to take away and try and build off, right? Because they need anything to try and build off. They have been, they were in last. I mean, I think they are still in last place of the full season. They are in last place of the full season GTD Pro entries still. So, but mind you, this is funny. The top 10 in GTD Pro are separated by fewer points than the top, well, like the BMW is to the leading Porsche in GTP. The 24 is 297 points behind the leading Porsche, and Vassar Sullivan is 295 points behind Rexy. So, I guess that just kind of goes to show how close GTD Pro has been this year and how much of a domination show it's been in GTP.
Yeah, still a lot of play in the GTD Pro class.
And there's more races for GTD Pro that are left this season as well. Right. I think they have 5 or 6. They're at every remaining race. So I think they should have 6 races left.
Yeah, with that extra one at VIR.
Yep. So
all right, that's 47-ish minutes of talking about the IMSA race at Detroit. I think that's good enough to call it there. I'll give a quick preview of the Le Mans test this week, and not that there's a whole lot to talk about with the Le Mans test, to be honest with you, and we'll have more than enough to talk about next week.
I know there's been lots of questions in the chat.
About, I do want to get to some of those.
Are we going to be talking about Le Mans in this just a little bit, because we will have an episode next week.
Yeah, next week is really the Le Mans show. This is the chance to get everything else in before then. 21 hypercars, of course, lining up the grid this year. Some of those coming over from IMSA that we had talked about a couple of minutes ago. Of course, you have that extra Porsche Penske 963, the number 4 car, coming over this year. And then you have the 2 Cadillacs from Whelen Engineering / Action Express and Wayne Taylor Racing. A little bit of questioning going on whether or not we'll see Felipe Drugovich in that Whelen Cadillac. I know he's been tossed around as a potential driver who could fill in for Lance Stroll if he's not able to race in the Canadian Grand Prix due to his hand injury.
Who do you bring out? Who do you bring to the Cadillac camp if Drugovich isn't able? Well, I guess maybe like one of the Wayne Taylor. Oh no, it's kind of from a competing team.
I mean, I was gonna say you can bring up a guy who used to race for the 311 if you want to call him back.
Does it rhyme with Shmipo Shmirani?
yeah, it does actually.
He might be available.
I was trying to remember if he's even in the race this year, and he's not. He's off the grid entirely, not racing in LMP2 either. So that's probably, I mean, I don't know how they ended terms there.
I think they were still on very good terms. It seemed like I remember videos coming out at the end of last year about, it seemed like GM is still very, very sad that he was leaving. So I don't think that people would say no to coming back and giving another crack at the top class.
Yeah. Well, and this is all baseless speculation again. Of course, this is on the account that Drugovich can't even race in the first place. Of course, we also have the return of the LMP2 class. We'll be seeing those cars on track in the World Endurance Championship for the first time this season. It's the only race they're taking part in nowadays. And then 24 cars, the largest class on the grid in the LMGT3 category as well. No additional manufacturers popping up for the 24 hours, but we do have an addition of quite a few cars from those 9 that we already have on the grid. Again, I really don't have a whole lot to add on here. This is the testing weekend. This is where we'll see a little bit of who's kind of where, but I wouldn't look far into the lap times. Okay, let's be honest. There's going to be games going on here. Be careful in how much performance you're showing. Even with the era of BOP that we're in nowadays with torque sensors and the amount of data that they're taking away from these cars, you're not going to see 100% of the story this weekend. So I'm going to be looking around to see if there's really any notable stories that come out of it at all. Hopefully everybody keeps their cars in one strong piece, and hopefully we don't see any major powertrain issues either. So short of that, we'll have a little bit of that to discuss in next week's episode, along with the rest of the preview for the 24 hours.
Is there going to be any of the test broadcast this weekend?
No,
do you know?
Unless, I mean, historically, no, and I don't believe anything has changed on that. If you do want to hear coverage of it, go tune into Radio Le Mans. They are pretty much the go-to source for hearing anything about the test day, trackside or at home.
Yeah.
But no, nothing really that you're going to see beyond that. Of course, also this weekend we have scrutineering as well. It is an event going on Friday and Saturday in the city center at Le Mans. If you are going to the race, great chance to go up and see the cars up close. It is a lot, at least the last time I went, a lot less busy than I believe the driver's parade is as well, although I haven't been to the driver's parade. But hearing from other people, it's a much better chance to get closer to some of the drivers than going to the parade. And you get to see the cars as well, and it's just a great atmosphere. So we'll have that on Friday and Saturday, and that is being streamed. So if you do want to see some of the cars going through the inspection process, it's not that exciting, but they do have some interviews going on with the drivers as well to make it worth your time. And then you get the first look some of those amazing liveries that we're going to be talking about during the race this year. Going to go through some of the questions, though, before the end of the episode, and I am going to keep it short. There were a lot of messages in the chat this episode, which I'm really appreciative of, but I do
love to see that.
Have to get to packing, so very much appreciate it.
The classic rain race podcast. Wait until after the episode to start your packing.
This is tradition at this point, except the difference is usually I'm going for like 5 days, not 18. I think I'm going to be away for.
True.
First of all, just wanted to get a shout out on here. Kevin in the chat starting us off strong here, saying the more podcasts, the better for the sport. But you all are the best going right now. I really appreciate that, Kevin, because we're going up against strong competition here. IMSA launched their new podcast this year, Matt Yoakum being the host of that. I think they're doing a phenomenal job over there on that show. Yep. And then there's definitely not a shortage of other sports car racing podcasts popping up here and there as well. So
and Kevin said this while we were late. We were late, and he said this before we even went live. Like, man,
we're not good enough for these people. Someone just going back talking about Detroit, saying they still prefer Belle Isle.
I saw think a lot
that's of that. That's a general consensus I've seen going around as well.
It's the consensus in the paddock with the drivers, the teams, the media, everybody. But we're not going back to Belle Isle, unfortunately.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. The city politics sort of threw that one out. So
yeah, maybe
as much as I think.
Maybe somebody needs to run for mayor of Detroit. That's a racing fan. And then we got a chance. There
you go. Heard it here first.
There we go. Somebody said that somebody is, I think, from Detroit that was in the chat, maybe. So that's your opportunity, whoever you are.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Let's see. Just going down.
Some questions about Le Mans,
lots of questions about Le Mans. I want to try to answer some of these, but I want to save a lot of them for next week. So I will try to
Yeah.
make note of as many of these as I can. And some of them I'll try to get to next week as well. What are your favorite class formats for the IMSA races? All classes GTD Pro / GTP only, all GT and all LMP and split races, etc. It's a great question. I think one of the things about Detroit that was easy for me to unpack is that we only had two classes on track.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier for you and me as fans to look at that race and make sense of what was going on. Also, the race only being an hour and 40 minutes plays part of that as well. When you're talking a 24-hour race with four classes on track, can get a bit difficult to figure out exactly what was going on for the entire race.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I do kind of like this format of two classes getting a showcase. I definitely wouldn't want the entire season to be run like this.
Yeah.
I think all four classes in IMSA right now have a place. I really like the way they have it set up right now.
Yeah.
Where you have a pro and a pro-am class for both categories of cars. I think that's pretty much the way it should be for what they're running right now.
Yep.
But I think there are certain races where it makes sense to have the two. This being one of them. Long Beach, of course.
Absolutely.
Another one. Get less cars on track. These are tracks where it's going to be, you're already short on space as is. And give some of those classes more time in the spotlight. For Detroit, of course, this was an important race for GM and Ford. So make sure that they have that representation. GM, of course, in both classes, and Ford right now only in GTD Pro. But that's sort of the showdown you want to see in Detroit. You want to see the best of the best representation for both of those manufacturers, and that's what we got. So,
yeah.
I don't know if I have a clear favorite.
Yeah, that's
overall, but I do definitely like the two that they're going with for some of these races.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, and like how IMSA has the variety that we see throughout the season. We get the different mixtures of classes. There's going to be a race at CTMP, which all the Canadian fans absolutely despise that they don't have the GTPs coming up. But it kind of is what it is. But we do have that LMP2 sort of race where they're the premier class, which just brings something else to the table for that in that one. But if you forced me to pick, I mean, right now, I really think that when IMSA has all four classes out on track, it's some of the best racing that we see. The traffic is a huge factor in sports car racing, and it really shows through in those races where all four classes are out on track. But I would love to see a GTP GTD Pro race at a track that's not Detroit as well. Really get an opportunity for those pro drivers to showcase what they have. So I do really like that double pro class format for a race or maybe a second race, at some point. But push comes to shove, the four race format or the four class format I think produces the best, my favorite races. But I do really like the pro GTP GTD Pro format as well.
Yeah. And to add on to that, since you mentioned it at the end, thoughts on all GT and all LMP in split races. I really don't agree with that, because I think one of the great parts of sports car racing is the traffic, is the challenge that brings. And yeah, you'd still have traffic if you were talking about GTP cars versus LMP2. They would eventually become, as long as you have a long enough green flag run, the LMP2s would come into the picture there. But I think overall what we're talking about here is, let's showcase multi-class endurance racing, even if we're not, I say endurance racing, I really just mean multi-class sports car racing.
Yeah.
Which is what this series and the World Endurance Championship are all about. I think if you do want to go see, we of course have that GT only race at VIR in IMSA right now, which I don't really think that's a bad event by any means.
Nope.
But I don't think that should become the norm. I mean, VIR is kind of an
Yeah.
exception where it's GT only or it's no VIR at all.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
I wouldn't want to see a situation where you have a second race at VIR the same weekend that's just prototypes as well. I think at that point, just bring two of the classes and put them on track at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
There's one question here. What's going on with Lamborghini and IMSA in the World Endurance Championship? WEC is easy. They're not there anymore. And don't think they will be unless we get a real surprise in the off season with somebody picking up that car as a customer and running it in the World Endurance Championship. I really don't have high expectations about that. Over on the IMSA side, of course, they're still running that GTP car for the endurance races. They'll be their next race out at Watkins Glen. It's been not a great start to the season for that car.
It's been a horrible start.
Yeah. I'm trying to be a little nice here. And we haven't, to this point, heard anything about customers interested in running it next year either. So whether that changes at some point, we'll see, I guess. We'll leave it at that. And then on the GT side, of course, you do have some representation with Lamborghini and IMSA. You have FAF right now in the GTD Pro class. And I do think FAF, I've said it for a while, but I think they're starting to knock on the door for stronger results with that car. So if they keep that upward trend going, then maybe we'll find a race win for them at some point this year. But beyond that, I'm not sure where you're going to see that prototype SC63 in either championship beyond this season. So keep an eye out for that, I guess.
Yeah. You might be wanting to send your goodbye kisses to the SC63 at the end of the year if things don't turn around in a hurry.
Yeah, I guess get out to a race if you want to see that car.
Yeah, if you want to see
Petit Le Mans,
if you want to see that car, in person, then you want to get out to Watkins Glen, Indy, or Petit for sure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might be able to see it in a museum one day. Who knows?
Well, and we don't want to see that car in a museum. Okay?
No,
I think
we're being a little bit maybe doom and gloomy, but
well, like let's be honest here. There's no reason that car couldn't be competitive. They never gave it a proper shot, though. I mean, we saw it run a full season in the WEC last year with one car. We saw it run a partial schedule in IMSA last year and this year, but they've never put the investment behind it. And I think that's like throw the dart on the board. Don't even throw the dart on the board. That is the bullseye of the issue with that program. So.
But we're not going to see that happen, though, because Lamborghini doesn't have the budget that they want to throw into the program. Is kind of the problem, right? Like,
well, it's a cat and mouse problem right now.
Because
if you don't have enough opportunities to showcase what that car is capable of, which they really don't, because they have 5 races in IMSA and 2 of them they can already toss in the bin, then you're not going to get customers interested in the car.
Yep.
Without customers, apparently there's no cars on the grid next year at all. So,
yep. But the customer is not going to, like, the customer isn't going to, it's a lot more difficult. I think you need the perfect customer to be able to develop that car, right? Or to help develop that car and make it better. And it's a tough ask for a lot of customer teams that would be interested in, joining the grid, I think, right? Like,
well, you need a highly invested customer because
somebody
not only are you
rich.
I mean, not just that, it needs to be somebody with a lot of experience already as well, because you are the sole program for that car now. It's very different from the customer 963 teams where you're running your car, but this car is also being developed and upgraded year on end by Porsche, and you have, let's just say, perhaps the strongest team in sports car racing right now, at least in prototype sports car racing. I think
that's accurate.
Backing it. So that's a big advantage if you're a customer looking into a manufacturer, is something like that. So it's a very tall mountain for Lamborghini to climb. If they do happen to find somebody in the off season who wants to bring on that investment, we'll see what that looks like next year. But like I said, that is a very tall mountain for anybody who picks it up.
Yeah.
Had a super chat in the chat earlier talking about
Had a few.
Detroit. Um, do you think AO Racing could have done better at Detroit? I would say short answer for me would be yes.
Yeah,
But
they
I
didn't
don't
have the
think they had
pace.
race. I mean, they didn't have race winning pace, I would say.
No. Yeah,
Um,
it wasn't. I mean, last year's race, I guess, was just chaotic.
yeah.
But yeah, they didn't have. I don't think they had the pace to be really a podium car in this one.
Well, and with everything that happened to them, it was kind of like, again, we talked about cars that punched a little bit above their weight in terms of where they finished with the 14. I think the 77's also kind of in the conversation. I mean, they finished fifth, and
Yeah.
they didn't have a race that went their way at all. So I think they could have done a little bit better. They definitely could have done better from a performance standpoint. But in terms of how much higher they would have finished, I don't know. I mean, maybe third. I don't really think they were looking much higher than that, though.
Yeah, I think that they were definitely behind the Corvettes in pace. I think that's safe to say. I think Faf showed strong pace in uh, throughout the entire weekend. I think that they were behind the Lamborghini. Probably similar in pace to Vassar Sullivan, maybe the BMWs as well, although the BMWs just decided to be plows in this race instead of race cars. But yeah, maybe, yeah, they could have got a podium. Like, they're definitely a team that's capable of pulling off a great strategy move to pick up a podium. But yeah, it's still a top five.
Yeah. A lot of questions about how we think people or drivers / manufacturers are going to do at Le Mans. I'm going to, I will say, ask those exact same questions next week.
Yeah.
After the test, I will be very glad to get to as many of those as you like. But for right now, it's a little difficult for me to know. We're going in kind of completely blind. We did get the famous 3-letter word this morning that came out for at least the test. Of course, it is subject to change. But I don't want to comment on it too much yet. I want to sort of keep all of that tied to next week.
Yep.
There's a question saying, can you guys show clips for some of these things? Noted for the future, for sure. I just need time ahead of the episodes to get those clips in place. So if I think of any...
I mean, I probably have a lot of them already.
Yeah,
So,
if I think of any
yeah.
specific move that we definitely are going to talk about in the show, I will try to get those because I think that'd be a great thing to put on for the video segment of this show in the future.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Thanks for the idea. We had another super chat from El Noob as well. Thank you for the additional super chat there. Just trying to breeze through some of these, so apologies again if I miss a couple. Do you plan to watch the Nürburgring 24-hour race? Yes. If
Yes.
so, apart from Dacia / Dacia, who is your favorite team / pilot, aka driver? So yeah, of course I'll be there. So I will be watching it in one way or the other. Hopefully we do get the full 24 hours in uninterrupted this year. That race is famous for having fog pop up overnight and very long red flag periods to disrupt it.
Yep.
For pro lineups, I tend to try to be a little bit impartial, but I will show my bias on this one and say it's a GT3 race. It's a category where we don't see many Audis nowadays. They've sort of lost a lot of that support. So I'm going to be cheering on the boys with 4 rings, and seeing how they're able to go up against that. We do have one. I've got to remember the entire lineup that we have, but we have at least one Audi in the SP9 class with Team Phoenix. Very strong team here who won 2 years ago. No, what year? 22? They won? Who won last year?
Oh,
I can't remember. My memory is just hazy.
The year before that was Ferrari, right? One of the Ferraris.
Yeah, Ferrari. The Fricadelli Ferrari won 24. 23. Sorry. Last year I can't remember who won.
Somebody in chat will know.
You know what's sad is it might have been Audi. I genuinely can't remember. 22 though was the Phoenix Audi.
Okay.
So I'll just say that. And then apart from that, I just love the Nürburgring 24 for the interesting, goofy entrance that we get. We used to have the Foxtail Opel Manta in the race. Last year we had a VW Beetle that was going around. It was like the what was the ultra limited road car they had was the Beetle RSI. They only made a few hundred editions of that, I think, but it was sort of similar to that, where it's like, what is this thing doing on the track? I love cars like that. So I don't know exactly what to expect this year. We have so many cars at that race, but definitely some of those Easter egg cars, as I call them, are favorites for me.
Yeah, I don't circle like a specific. I'm not really tied to a specific manufacturer or anything like that going into it. Usually, I find myself rooting for. I'm a huge homer, so if there's Canadians in the race, then I'm going to cheer for the Canadians. Which there's usually a few. I think Michael Grenier in a Mercedes is usually one of the locks for that race. But usually it's just looking at the entry list and just kind of picking out a couple that I'm like, oh, I like these driver lineups. I'll root for them. So I'll take a look in a couple of weeks. So, and as Cam points out, he says Robert Pickens will be there.
Yeah,
yes, Robert Wickens will be there in TCR. So definitely be at the top of. I'll be at the top of the cheerleading rankings for Robbie in that race.
Andrew, you here tonight? Andrew Kissinger in the chat.
Oh,
if not, best of luck.
Yeah, true. He's gonna be he'll be in that race. Well, not racing in that race, but helping out with that car.
You could put him in the race. I mean,
yeah,
that's it's one of those races where, you know, if you're half good, you can throw yourself on track.
There you go.
Of course, it was the Scherer Phoenix Audi who won last year, by the way. I knew off the back of my head that sounded familiar, but for some reason that race escaped my mind.
Well, half of the race didn't happen, so it would be reasonable for you to maybe not remember.
I think that's about it. Yeah, we're a little further than I wanted to go.
We had one more. We had one more super chat from El Noob. It's easy to get lost, but his question was, I'm trying to get a spotter guide for the Nürburgring and a general IMSA one, but I'm not able to find one. Where do you get it ASAP? I can speak to the IMSA one. That's an easy one. If you just follow Andy Blackmore is the one that does them for IMSA. He'll put out a new one for every race. If you just Google Andy Blackmore spotters guides, then that will be it'll be the first result that comes up. I think IMSA also usually puts them out on social media in the lead up to races as well. The Nürburgring one though, I'm not sure. Do you know of where
I can help you out with that?
Because I know there's like the Andy Blackmore equivalent in Europe, but I don't know if that's who you look to.
Spotters.guide is the website. Spotters.guide. Pretty easy to remember. Bookmark that one. Mateusz Groziak is the one behind that. Sort of a fan style rendition of the Andy Blackmore style that we're used to, but he's gotten permission with Andy to sort of work with that design, and just does phenomenal jobs for some of the races that we usually don't get spotter guides for. So
he also does one for Le Mans, I think, as well.
Yes, you'll see that up for Le Mans as well, alongside the official from the WEC. Okay, I think that's I'll leave it at that for now. To give you an update on the shows as they stand right now. As I said at the beginning of the episode, get used to the Tuesday shows. Will be here planned for the next 2 Tuesdays, but the times will be a little bit different. Next Tuesday is planned for 6 p.m. Eastern, which is the time zone you and I are typically working with. I will be over in France. It will be midnight local over there, so that should be midnight Central European time if you are over there. And then the following week, the Le Mans review episode, I'll be over in Germany, getting ready for the Nürburgring 24. You'll be getting ready for the 6 hours of the Glen.
Yep.
And that will be on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, aka 9 p.m. Central European. So moving the times around a little bit here.
So book the day off work.
Yeah. Don't do that. Just listen to us on Spotify if you need to. Lost my train of thought here. If we do need to make any changes with that, I'm going to give it my best college try to make sure we can get these shows in while I'm away. I'll be working off a laptop, but I'll try to get the whole camera set up going there as well. I'm bringing the microphone with me, and the only hurdle might be the Wi-Fi. So as long as the Wi-Fi is good enough, we will get those shows out as necessary. If anything changes on that, I'll put updates on the YouTube community tab. Actually, they just call it like posts now or something. They don't call it a community tab anymore. And our social media over on X as well, at Rain Race Podcast. Throw some updates there if needed. And then the following Thursday, I don't want to commit to this yet because it's so far out, but we should be back to a traditional schedule, 8 p.m. Eastern time for a Watkins Glen review. And then like 24 hours of spas going on, which I'm that's going to be the weekend after the Watkins Glen and the Nürburgring. So
you're not doing that. You're not going to that one, are you?
I'm not doing that one. This is going to be a little too much. So
I know there was a moment where you were thinking about it, weren't you?
I thought of it for sure.
Yeah.
I'd be leaving for Le Mans a week later. So
okay.
Someday we'll hit that one. 3 24-hour races in a row is just a little too much. So
yeah.
Crazy for the drivers and the teams who are going to be taking part of that, and the photographers as well. So
I was just going to say, anybody that's involved in it, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I've got. I'm going to go pack. I'm going to go catch a plane tomorrow. Like I said, long 24-hour race for me ahead before I catch that flight. And we'll hopefully be back next Tuesday. Don't forget the time, 6 p.m. Eastern, midnight Central European, for another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. It's my favorite episode of the year. We're talking 24 hours of Le Mans, and hope to see you all there. Stu, what a great time to have that camera go out on me.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Take care.